You ready?
Right.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States
of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I'm George Ragsdale. This is normally a 7-member commission. There are 3 missing tonight. Tonight we have to my left Commissioner Fred Edwards, Jennifer Fletcher, and to my right Joe Kramer. Since there are no zoning applications on the agenda tonight, I'm not going to read through all of the rules for how we're going to handle those. I'm just going to skip right to the chase and open the meeting for public comment. If there is anything that you would like to say or speak or ask questions about something that's not on the agenda, this is your time to do that, and you can come forward. If not, we'll move on. Need a motion to close public comment.
So moved. I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next item is the approval of the minutes from the June 22nd meeting. I think everybody probably got a copy of Paul's note, and I assume Robin's corrected the minutes to note that Fred was absent for that meeting.
Actually, Fred sent it to me.
I'm sorry?
Fred sent it to me first.
Oh, I thought Paul. Okay.
No, I still read.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
Yeah.
Other than noting that Fred was not in attendance at the meeting, are there any other changes to the minutes from the June 22nd meeting?
No.
Okay, hearing none, we need a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Robin, would you sound the first item, please?
The first item is RZ 1002. It's a text amendment to delete or amend the following sections of the City of Milton zoning ordinance to be consistent with the City of Milton telecommunications ordinance with the following sections. Section 64-74, nonconforming lots, uses and structures, 64-1097, miscellaneous provisions of the State Route 9 Overlay District, Section 64-1592, alternative antenna support structure to exceed the district height, Section 64-1594, antenna tower and associated structures, radio, TV, microwave broadcasting, etc., to exceed the district height in O&I C1, M1A, M1 and M2, and lastly, Section 64-1801, antenna, tower, and associated structure, radio, TV, microwave, broadcasting, etc., to exceed the district height, residential districts, MIX, and AG1 districts. So in your packet, you did receive the actual amendment or strikeouts and everything that was going to be amended, as well as a short memo explaining the purpose behind it. Basically just trying to get the zoning ordinance not to conflict with our now telecommunications ordinance that was initially approved in December of '09. It's now being further amended, and I believe going to be at the August 2nd meeting, but we're just trying to keep everything, the right hand and the left hand, in the right positions. So, you don't like that, Fred?
No, I couldn't see it.
Oh, okay.
No.
So, I won't bore you with going through the memo, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Questions for Robin?
Mr. Chairman, do we, if there are no questions, can we approve RZ 10-02 as complete, as one unit instead of moving each section?
Exactly, that's how we're doing it.
I do have a question before we get to that. I'm concerned about the fact that we are being asked to approve these amendments when the ordinance that these are supposedly dealing with hasn't been approved yet. We don't know what changes are going to be made when this goes to the City Council. And we can make an assumption that there's not going to be any changes that affect this, but we don't know that. You know, if the December ordinance was the ordinance that was going to stay in place, then this would make sense, right? But to the extent that there's going to be changes in that come the August meeting, what are we going to do? Go back and redo it?
Let me add, though, that to the extent that we have an ordinance that's in place, that was put in place in December, and even with that ordinance, there are these same conflicts.
Okay.
This would then just remove those from either one.
So are you guys, once whatever happens in August happens, are you guys gonna go back and revisit this to make sure that there's nothing there that would be inconsistent after the changes?
Absolutely, and I don't anticipate, I have been involved in that, and I don't anticipate there being anything else that might be terribly inconsistent. There may be one or two places, in fact, that we have missed, but we'll
Okay.
find those, I'm sure.
Okay. If we could just take them one at a time, I did have a couple of questions, and unfortunately I dropped this in the car, I got to figure where I am. 6474, section 6474, which is the first one. Section 4, which is the section where D was deleted. I'm okay with it. I would suggest, because it's not capitalized, that when we say that could not be built under the terms of this ordinance, that we ought to add the word zoning. Only because in the absence of that, if the ordinance is construed to be the entire ordinance for the city, this, to me, doesn't have any effect, because it's saying when a structure exists on the date but can't be built under the terms of this ordinance, which would incorporate the new telecommunications ordinance. And so it provides, to me, a loophole for them to say it can't be built, therefore. So to me, the ordinance we're talking about is solely the zoning ordinance, right?
Yes, I think it's referencing solely the zoning ordinance.
In
Sorry?
section 4, yeah.
I think it specifically is referencing solely the zoning ordinance. This D section is specifically for telecommunications facilities, and that just removes any option for them to use this as to get a new approval based on there being an existing tower there.
And a similar statement is actually in the ordinance, existing ordinance. It
Okay.
talks about that they can't retroactively take away a permit that's already been permitted and built, or even just permitted, actually. I think the ordinance, at least in the one it exists now, states that even if it's just an approved one and not built, they can't take it away.
And that remains.
I did have also a question. I looked at the ordinance as it now stands. The ordinance, chapter 54, that's in place as of now anyway, or in effect as of now. And I have a question on that with respect to, try to find it again. Sorry, I dropped this and it's not in order.
While you're doing that, George, let me ask a quick question. 64-1097, where you left in the stealth design, and you explained your note about that being stricter than the telecommunication ordinance, and that's why it stayed here. Is there anything in the telecommunication ordinance that addresses the stealth design?
It encourages it. It doesn't exclude it, so that's why, definitely, it encourages it. It talks about it, but that's not the only type of design is permitted in the ordinance. So Highway 9 would be a little bit more stringent in that it's requiring a stealth design.
In fact, in the last proposal, you have to, one of the factors, one of the criteria for deciding approvals of new cell tower applications is, did you consider a stealth design? And if you did not, why not? So they have to show that they've considered it and why they've cut that out of the consideration.
So let me pick up on Joe's question, because I was confused when I read that. Your note, Robin, on section 64-1097 says that Highway 9 remains, this requirement for stealth design within the Highway 9 overlay district remains, since it's a requirement that's more strict. And so when I looked at Highway 9, the only thing that's there that I saw was a single line item that references self-design, but it doesn't necessarily require that, right?
Well, under what I'm looking at, section 641097B says stealth design is required for all cell towers.
But how are cell towers defined? Because we've created terms now in this ordinance, right, that says, we've got, a cell tower is not a defined term anymore. We've got wireless telecommunication facilities, and we've got, what's the other one? There were two terms that were used in the new ordinance. One is a wireless telecommunication facility, and the other is something else, but it's not a cell tower.
Antennas?
Telecommunications facility. There's a telecommunications facility and a wireless telecommunications facility. The cell tower is no longer a defined term. So when we look at that in Highway 9, is cell towers defined in section 641097?
No, it isn't. I'm looking in the definitions of the overall ordinance, and there's no definition for cell tower.
So
There's cellular.
To
but-
Joe's point, I mean, if we want to leave it in Highway 9 because it's more stringent, we probably need to either create a definition for cell tower or else use one of the definitions in the new ordinance to enforce that.
Call it telecommunications, antenna tower. Well, no,
I
I want
think
to
you
go
could
by
just
it.
change the verbiage to state stealth design is required for all wireless communication facilities.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we can use the new definition to fall back on.
The other one, I had a question, this was back in the ordinance, and again, this may be intentional, but I just want to make sure that we understand. Stealth technology installation is defined to be acceptable when it's installed in an existing structure that does not significantly change the profile of the existing structure. What are we calling the existing structure? Is the structure the entire pole, or is it the building on the ground?
And I believe you're getting that from the new ordinance, correct?
Yes,
The new
yeah.
proposed ordinance, yes. They're talking about a stealth antenna that's attached to a building. You can have those in addition to a camouflage tower, which is also stealth to some degree.
But when we say it doesn't significantly change the profile, are we really saying it's no higher than the existing tower?
Correct.
Okay.
No
Why don't we
higher than
just
the
say that?
existing building, or, again, doesn't stick out significantly from the building, so any more than maybe an
I guess all I'm saying, significantly is not a defined term, right? I mean,
No.
it's in the eye of the beholder. Why don't we just say it's no higher than the existing, if that's what we really mean?
I don't
I
have.
mean, I could argue that 10 feet higher doesn't significantly change the profile.
Potentially, I think that that's one of those beauty is in the eye of the beholder things, and I agree that yes,
But it
it's
certainly
not
opens it to more
specifically
challenge
defined.
than if you say it can't be any higher than.
Potentially, I will say that our attorneys have looked at it and they don't find any issue with that. I don't know if there's an industry standard, for instance, for that.
They get to bill hours if
Some
they
of
have
our-
to defend litigation.
Sure.
The other thing is the rest of that, which says, and it is not readily noticeable to the untrained eye. I would argue that any of the examples that are in here, including, the tree that's 150 feet in the air, is readily noticeable to the untrained eye. So, again, okay. We weren't asked to look at it, but it just seems to me that we've included terms that open ourselves up to too much subjectivity because they're not well enough defined. There was one other, help me, again, I'm looking at the existing ordinance on page 13. I don't understand the difference between number 1 and number 2. One
Which
talks
section would that be?
I'm sorry, it's section 7A.
Are you talking about the telecommunications ordinance, or?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Which I just pulled it out.
It talks about, number 1 talks about installing an antenna on an existing structure. Number 2 talks about co-locating by installing an antenna on an existing tower. I don't understand the difference.
Read that again, George.
Well, this is the
Yeah,
approval
sure.
process.
Right.
Okay? And number 1 says that, number 1 says installing an antenna on an existing structure. That's the first phrase, so long as the installation is considered to be stealth technology, et cetera. Number 2 says co-location by installing an antenna on an existing tower or alternative tower structure. I just don't understand the distinction, I guess. In one case, we're saying we want stealth technology, and which is what we just talked about. But in the other one, it doesn't say anything about that. It just says co-location by installing an antenna, and it doesn't say anything about stealth technology.
What that does is, in effect, it allows an expedited approval for an installation that's a stealth technology installation
That's
versus
what number 1 does.
just a straight co-location.
I'm sorry?
Versus just a straight
But
co-location.
it allows for an expedited if it's a co-location too.
It does, and in fact, that has been changed in this new version because of the recent change in state law that addresses co-location specifically.
Okay.
So I wouldn't worry about that section because that section does look significantly different from
Okay.
the draft you probably got there.
Okay. I'll shut up. I have no other questions.
No.
I mean, personally, I think all the changes, given the ordinance that exists, are fine. The one exception is what we just talked about.
Yeah,
the
we
rate
could, we
that
can
Bill
capture that,
pointed
and
out.
we'll make that change.
Stealth design.
Okay, so with that, I guess we need a motion to approve with the one change.
I move we approve RZ 10-02 to delete or amend the following sections of the City of Milton zoning ordinance to be consistent with the City of Milton telecommunications ordinance with the change under section 64-1097B stating that stealth design is required for all wireless communication towers.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any comments? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Next one, Robin.
And now I have to find my. Okay, the next item is RZ 1003 to amend section 64-1606A of the City of Milton zoning ordinance roadside produce stands to include MIX mixed use. This is an item in the use permit section that will be allowing MIX to be included in the required districts for a roadside stand. So it's pretty self-explanatory. As I stated in the memo, just MIX does contemplate a retail component, and we see it's appropriate place for a roadside stand to be placed with a administrative use permit.
Okay, any questions on this particular proposed change?
No.
Okay, hearing none, we need a motion to approve.
Make a motion, we approve RZ 10-03, text amendments of the City of Milton zoning ordinance, roadside produce stands to include MIX mixed-use district.
Second.
Any comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Next item, Robin.
Okay. Number 8, RZ 1004, to amend the City of Milton zoning ordinance to create a required distance for convenience stores and service stations from residential uses zoning districts. Staff notes that this item will be administratively deferred to the August 24th Planning Commission meeting and be heard before the Mayor and City Council on September 20th, basically based on needing further time to do some more work on it, as well as this will go through the process as was approved or ratified by the council. And so it will, after you hear it in August, it will go before the council as in a work session right before their September meeting. I believe their work session is the second week in September, and then the next week it'll go before them. So we're just trying to make it go through the process that they had just ratified. So if you have any other questions. I'd
Do
be
we
happy
need
answer.
to approve the withdrawal?
It's not really withdrawal, it's,
So administratively withdrawn, right?
Yeah, it was done administratively, so I don't think so.
no, it's different, yeah. It's just-
Okay.
We just had to sound it because it was advertised, so.
Just, if it's all right with you guys, what I'd like to do is just, the salient features of this, I think it would be worth hearing about, so we've got a little bit more time to think about it. I mean, the intent here, in, what is it, 100 feet or 100 yards?
100 feet we're looking at to do from property line to property line, and did you want me to talk about it, or I can send you guys the memo that
Yeah,
we're
that'd be
working
good.
on?
I mean, I just, to me, the impact of that is something that I think it would be good for us to understand better before we show up in the 24th.
I agree.
Sure.
We can send a PDF of some of the exhibits that we have that
Okay.
include maps.
Right.
Okay.
Because the impact's pretty dramatic. Okay, next
Okay.
item?
The next item is we're creating a new section of old business so we can discuss any issues that we had previously been discussed. So number 1, under old businesses, discuss status of process and procedures for text amendments.
And I asked to create this simply so that I can have an opportunity to give you all an update on what council actions have taken for those who don't always get to go to council meetings and don't like to watch them on Granicus. So in particular, the last item that we took, or you all took before the council, was a process for approval of ordinances with a committee. And they asked for a few changes. It's very similar, what they've asked for from the work session, very similar to what you all originally recommended. The major changes are that, and this is really not a change, but they just reiterated that the committees may request 2 planning commissioners to serve on a single issue committee, and that the planning commission would choose those based on interest and availability from amongst the commissioners. So that doesn't mean that anyone has to, it's a request. So the other major change would be that a single version of the proposed amendment is to be presented to council that is approved by the planning commission, but also that it incorporate the work of both the commission and the committee via joint committee commission work sessions, which may mean that it takes several of those work sessions to come to a good consensus, but I believe that they're happy with that. And then at that point, the final document would be sent, again, like I said, back through both committees to another joint work session as necessary, or back to you all as the planning commission for approval and recommendation, and then on to council for approval. And then the final change is something that's a little bit newer. It was requested that if it is a council member that, a single council member that requests a major change, a major text amendment, that council member gain consensus of the entirety of the council, or at least a majority of the council, before significant staff work is done on a text amendment. And so you'll notice, and I did print it out on larger paper, but you'll notice that as far as the flow chart goes, there are 2 new boxes at the top, which include a council member initiated concept, and then that concept is then presented to council work session for their consensus before it's considered a proposal to the city to the council, and then flowing down to the city manager to get assigned to the appropriate staff and personnel. So those are the changes. And we've presented a resolution to them. They're scheduled to hear this on August the 2nd, if anyone would like to be present. Are there any questions?
I have a couple. Some of these may sound nitpicky, but to me, using the word consensus is probably not a good idea. I mean, if we really mean that they're going to put it to a vote and the majority's going to roll, if that's the way we're going to define consensus, that's okay. But if there's 4 council members there and they agree, is that going to move it forward, or is it going to require consensus of the council?
Well, they can't actually vote at work session, so there has to be a majority that seem to be in favor. So, like I said,
Majority of those present?
It's present.
Okay. I mean, if that's what we mean, that's
Yeah,
it doesn't matter to me. Okay.
Yeah,
The other thing, and this may not be a change, but I apologize if I didn't notice it before. What this is saying, if I read it correctly, is that any of the things that we want to work on, we have to get the council's approval first,
Yes, sir.
as opposed to the city manager. Which I thought was what we had before, was that the city manager was going to be the one that approved that if it involved staff resources.
No, we originally had them all going through council except for a staff-initiated proposal, which would go to the city manager. And then,
Okay.
of course, it would be his duty, or it would be incumbent on him to gain that consensus of council in order to move forward on that.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure it's clear. The other one, Len, is the change that you made for the recycle.
Yes.
I understand if changes are required, why would that come back if it's a no?
If it's presented at council work session and they do not agree to move it forward, then we send it back to joint work session.
So what's the difference between that and changes required?
Um, Maybe there isn't.
I mean, I think about a no, like if there's an application where it's denied. In this case, we're talking about zoning amendments, so
Yeah.
there isn't any real denial. I mean,
And it's a work session, so there isn't a real denial, it's just
Okay.
we don't like it.
okay. All right.
Is this, George, how, I mean, you and I were at that council meeting. How do you feel as far as what you presented to them as far as the,
Well, I think it's consistent with what
Consistent.
we talked about. I mean, I think the recycle piece makes sense. It's something that needs to be there, and it does take it back. That joint work session is irrespective of whether there are any planning commission members on that separate committee or
or
not.
not? Okay.
And that reloop only takes place if there is a council-appointed committee. If an ordinance gets to that work session, and maybe this is something we need to talk about here, if an ordinance gets to that work session and there is no council-appointed committee, it's going to come back to that same block, but it's not going to be a joint work session. It's going to be just the planning commission, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
So no, I think it
Okay.
works. The thing that troubles me a little bit is that block up at the top, and I apologize for not noticing it before, but I think we got a perfect example in front of us. I mean, we had 2 meetings ago, I think, is when we talked about our kind of priority list that we wanted to try and get proactive around. We've yet to get that in front of council. It's been deferred twice now. This says we can't do anything with that until they approve what we have presented to them for things we want to work on. So we're kind of sitting here now with our hands tied because we can't get that. That bothers me that we don't have a little bit more freedom. Again, I was okay with the idea if it involves staff resources that should go there, but if we wanted to do something on our own, even if, I mean, why are we any different than a citizen or a committee if we wanted to do something on our own before we present it, right? As opposed to, we can't even work on it until we get it approved.
I'll say this, that list of priorities will be at the work session on August the 9th. If that's still a concern that you have or would like to clarify that understanding a little bit more, then that's probably a good time to bring that up.
Well, I mean, I guess I would look for your advice. I mean, that list is a long list, and it's a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of meat in there. If they endorse that as an appropriate list for us to be addressing, regardless of the time frame, my question would be, have we passed the first block on everything that's on that list? And if the answer to that's yes, then I think I'm okay with that.
Right.
If we have to come back with each one of those each time to say, okay, we're now ready to work on the next one, and, then it just gets cumbersome.
I think our intent was that we would take that list and they would approve or deny all of it and or, like I say, make changes, but that once it's complete, then
Okay.
that's our approval to work and move forward on those.
So they could actually change some of the priorities,
Sure.
That's fine.
which is fine.
Yeah.
Right. But as long as
Just
it's
as
a
long as we
group,
walk
because
away with
otherwise
the-
we have
the end
27.
stuff to work on, yeah.
And many of those we could be working on simultaneously.
Yeah. Okay. I'm okay. Any other comments, changes, corrections? Everybody okay with this as is?
Looks fine.
Okay, good. When will this be? This will be on August, at the August 2nd council meeting?
Second?
Could be there.
I'm assuming you guys are going to present it, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm only asking because I won't be able to be there. I'm going to be out of town, so I know Fred will be there.
Yeah.
I'll
Since
be
I
sure to let them know.
got picked on at the meeting by council saying, well, Fred's got plenty of time, he can be the one you can say, go to these.
They volunteered Fred to be the
Well, the
volunteer.
council volunteered me because I was in the audience. What did I do?
Showing up.
That's right, yeah,
That's
exactly.
what you get for showing up. Okay.
One-
Do we need a motion on this?
No, sir, it's just an information item.
Okay, appreciate that. Thanks for all your work on that.
No problem.
Is there any other old business? Part of the packet included the revised bylaws. We don't.
That
have
was
to do
just for
anything with that,
FY,
except
just
take
for your
note of it.
records, so
They're
you
there.
can have it,
Yes.
yes.
Did you answer Curtis's question, by the way?
No, I haven't. I forwarded you that email
Oh, I'm
from
sorry,
about
yeah.
Cordis.
Yeah, we need
No,
to-
I haven't talked to, I haven't responded yet.
I purposely didn't, because I would have said, read the bylaws.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, but
But,
Yeah, we thought we made it clear.
We'll be sure to
but-
get some answer tomorrow.
okay.
I'm sorry.
On,
I assumed that you
just a
did.
point on new, it has nothing at all to do, staff, as far as on section 64-1097, has nothing to do with the telecommunications. But a question arose on H, which is vending machines, paper stands, and other similar devices must be located interior to the building structure. My question is, was that grandfathered anywhere in the ordinances relative to those businesses that were there that had newspaper stands and so forth out in their front of their convenience store? Are they grandfathered?
Typically, that would be grandfathered. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure how we would go about, or they would go about proving whether they were or weren't.
Right.
So it's gonna be harder for us to enforce on the older businesses, but new businesses, we have been able to do that.
You are enforcing, I mean, that is something under the code that code enforcement's looking at?
I don't really see a lot of
That's a
newspaper.
different
Yeah.
question.
No, I know.
I mean,
Just-
in a CO, they don't have them out there, how's that?
No, and it's not, nothing's been brought up, you know,
Yeah.
nobody's waving flags or anything.
I'm not
But,
saying that they don't show up
And it
periodically
was-
now and again.
you know, and I think
Blend
the
into
ordinances,
landscape.
I'm not concerned as much as about the paper stands as these magazines that, you know, there's 27 different real estate things out in front. So I just didn't know if that was one that we kind of looked at, but looked over, or we are enforcing, so,
On new construction, they're not allowed. so.
okay. Very good. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
The only thing I wanted to do, and this is not really old business per se, but one of the things that I talked to Lynn about last night was, tonight was a good example, I think, of how we can move through some of these ordinance changes fairly quickly, but if we get into another one like an historic preservation ordinance or something where we're starting with, in essence, starting from scratch with a new ordinance, or where we're being asked to look at an entire ordinance and recommend changes, my feeling is, and I'll use the historic preservation ordinance as an example, that we spend far too much time in our regular meetings dealing with that, and it's not very efficient and effective. I would like to suggest when those kinds of things come up, that we schedule a special work session before the meeting so that we can actually do that kind of legwork, and when we get here to the meeting, hopefully be in a position to approve it and move it forward with changes, and instead of kind of, I mean, Joe and I, you all know, Joe and I are going to wordsmith it because that's just what we do, and so we
Right.
want to make sure it's clear, and those kinds of things, I think, are better done ahead of time, so when we get here, we've got something that's got all that wordsmithing stuff kind of worked out, and we're dealing with material issues and concept. I just wanted to
Good
run that
point.
by you guys,
Right.
if that's okay.
Totally
As they
agree.
come up, I would ask you guys to help us schedule a work session to deal with those.
We can do that.
I mean, we used to do work sessions when we had, zoning cases, but it's been so long since we had one, that nobody remembers what they're like, so. Okay, great. If there's nothing else for the good of cause, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. Thank you for coming.